Welcome to African Airguns. Today we are going to be disassembling the Kral Bighorn to get it ready to do some machine work to it so that we can install the new Magnum upgrade kit from African Airguns. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with the shroud. Just going to unscrew the end cap for the shroud. Okay. I'm going to pull this long aluminium shaft off the barrel, and then we're going to also pull the base of the shroud. The next is we're going to undo the grub screws. In this case, the grub screw I've already removed one just for ease for time. So just like that. Take the whole grub screw out. And then we're just going to head and we're going to just kind of twist the barrel a bit to get it out, and then you just work it out a bit, and then you can get it out. So that's the barrel. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn it over, and we're going to remove the screw that actually holds the receiver frame onto the stock. Just drop that out, just like that. Now we're going to pull the whole receiver out, and we'll place the stock up there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the factory original valve and bottle, and how we do this is basically we're going to take the same little Allen key that we used to remove the barrel. We're going to place it into the bottom of the receiver. We're going to take these out. Actually, you don't even have to pull these all the way out. There's two of them. And this is just going to allow us to separate the Kral factory valve from the receiver block. That should do it. By leaving them in, just so, in case you happen to misplace them. There it comes out. So that is the original. It takes a bit of effort because there's those big O-rings that are holding it in place, and they put force against basically it creates a seal inside there, but also makes it quite difficult to remove. So now the block is removed from it, and that is the factory original. That we aren't going to be using anymore, so we're going to put that aside. So the next thing is we're going to do the machining of the receiver, and I will post pictures of that process. Alright, so now we have finished the machine work, and so what we actually did was, when I say machine work, we actually just drilled out the transfer port section of the breech block, and this is just to allow for better air transfer between the new valve and going through the barrel. So we drilled it out 8.5 millimeter, and then we also put in an M10 grub screw thread because we obviously can't use the original. You can see how much bigger that is. And so the M10 grub screw will act as the back grub screw. Okay. Also, it's very important once you bore this out, drill it out, bore it out, is to actually clear any debris out of there. So you can use it by blowing with high pressure air. That's probably the best way to do that. Then what we also did was we took the barrel and we opened up the passage. We bored that out as what was 8.5. It's kind of the max between these two O-rings, and this is just to make sure that we get as much air going through as possible. And then we also don't want to break through those O-ring grooves, because that will cause a problem with the O-rings and the seal inside. Next thing is we want to put the hammer spring back, the hammer back in with the new springs. One thing about a 4500 psi valve, obviously it requires a lot more hammer strike to open the valve. So what we've come up with is, because this spring is quite restrictive, we have a secondary spring, and the smaller spring goes in through the big spring, and then the spring retainer goes on like that, and they just sit like that. Next thing is we want to put this hammer back in. So we're going to insert it like this, and we're going to make sure that it goes in straight, obviously. We want to just push it in like that, and then we're going to put the spring in like that. It's going to sit, and you just have to pull the trigger because it's catching on the triggers here, like that, and then we simply just screw that back in. And the nice thing about this is that you can actually adjust the spring tension on these guns. So once you've got it in, you can actually make it go in further, but for now we're just going to put it in like that. So there's the hammer with the new hammer springs installed. Obviously it's a lot harder to cock it. Again, it's what it's doing is producing much heavier hammer strike. Alright, so this is the Magnum valve from African Ordnance, 4500 psi valve. When you get this valve, it comes obviously not attached to the bottle. So when you first fill it, it's very important. This valve does not have a valve return spring inside here to close the valve. So it's very important when you first fill that you actually pull the valve stem, making sure that the poppet is in the closed position, okay? And then you fill it, and it's quite normal for sometimes at very, very low pressure to hear air pass through the transfer port. It's absolutely normal. And then as the pressure builds up, it's good that pressure inside this bottle is going to force the poppet to seal. And also the same thing happens when you fire the gun. It's actually the pressure inside this bottle that is closing the valve, as we don't use a valve return spring in here. So that is very important. So what is key is when installing these valves on the receiver frame is to actually just give it a bit of a silicon, it's a small amount of silicon lube, just to spread it around those O-rings. It also stops the O-rings pinching, and it makes it easier to put the O-rings into the receiver itself. So what we're going to do here, just going to slide that in. And it's also important to line those little guys up. So what is helpful is to actually put this in the cock position, put it onto safe, and then push that in, just lining the brass burst disc up with those two, and that should line everything up for you. And then all we're going to do is we're going to tighten these little guys back up. And turn that one there, like that. Now it's important to make sure these are nice and tight in place. Okay. So then the next important thing is we want to put this barrel back in. So same thing we're going to apply with the barrel. First of all, let's just put this onto fire and let's just decock it. Okay, so that is nice and safe. Next thing is we want to put a bit of silicon lube just around the O-rings here. Okay, want to make sure that the transfer port section is facing downwards, and now we are going to slide this in. It's also important to make sure that we line up with everything in here. Okay, I'm going to get these grub screws nicely, holes nicely lined up, and then often these are quite tight to put back in. So we just get a little rubber mallet here, and we're just going to kind of put that into place. I can see that the little divots on the barrel, on the outside of the barrel, are in place. And then we're simply just going to screw this back in. Make it nice and tight. And then next thing we're going to put the big M10 grub screw in. Alright, next thing we're going to put the grub screw in. It's the big M10 one. Turn that all the way in there. Like that. I may have forgotten to mention that the one thing that is important to, obviously before installing this valve upgrade, is to fill the valve it doesn't really matter what you fill it to, if it's 2000 or 4500 psi before you reinstall it, as long as there's air pressure in there, then it's fine to reinstall. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to place the bottom of the shroud, slide it onto the barrel, and we're going to put the aluminium shroud back on. Just slide it down. And then we are going to install the end cap for the shroud. And we just simply screw that on. Like that. Alright, so that's the barrel being put back in place. Putting the valve on and bottle, and the shroud back in. The one thing that does also need to change on the stock is that these slots here need to be widened out, and also internally here that needs to be opened up a bit, and this can be done with a Dremel. It takes maybe about 30 or 40 minutes of Dremel, and both slots just need to be widened up a bit, and that's just to make space for this. It's a bigger valve block than what the original is. So now when we put the actual whole receiver and barrel and the valve and the bottle back on, we're just simply going to put it back into the stock. I'm going to make sure this is all the way back, like that. Everything's nice and flat, and you'll know that it's in place correctly is that the bottle doesn't sit canted upwards, that it sits snugly in the bottom of the stock. So you're simply going to turn that like that, and put in your screw, and just going to sit there, and we're going to tighten this back in nice and snugly. The whole upper frame is just held in place by one big screw, like that. And that is how you upgrade a Kral Bighorn, the African Air Ordnance upgraded valve. This bottle, I mean, it depends what you prefer. If you prefer carbon fiber or if you prefer aluminium. Aluminium is a bit better it can handle, especially going hunting, and a lot of scratches and dings, and I actually prefer them over carbon fiber, but a lot of people like carbon fiber. Thanks for watching.